Hello everybody and welcome to another video. If I'm doing Horus Heresy content, I have to do a tier list. So let's jump in and do a tier list. Yes, well, if I'm going to be doing the Horus Heresy content, you've got to do a tier list. It's kind of just like a YouTube rite of passage. You've got to do one eventually. So I figured what I would do is, my opinion, entirely based on my opinion, I've played a lot of the Legions. I've played against quite a few of the Legions. So I'm going to sort of just do my sort of 2 cents, and I'm going to base this on how good their Legion traits are, how good the reactions are, their units, models, sort of like the general overview. I'm not going to go into sort of like ultra competitive, because when it comes into that, there is literally just a few clear runners, and some of the other, obviously, Legions are not so good. So we're going to kick it off. So we've got Broken. There's clearly one or two. There's Solid Legions. They're good all-rounders, and then could be better, and then so bad. Pretty simple. It's not in nothing crazy and outlandish. And again, like I said, this is purely my opinion. So what we're going to have a little look at first is we're going to go for the first Legion. So we're going to be looking at the first one. We'll just do it in alphabetical order all the way along. Okay. So Alpha Legion. I am going to put them in solid. And the reason why I'm putting them in solid is because they've got a lot of cool tricks. Back in first edition, they were incredibly good with this little saboteur, just basically blowing up Spartan tanks on turn 1. Really, really good. And now they've got some pretty solid rules. One of the really cool rules that they still have and retain in the new edition is the fact that they're able to use units from other legions. So if you've got an army an army list that you've got, but you will really sort of want to, you're missing like a key unit that would really sort of fit that gap in your arsenal, you can literally just cherry pick the units from the other legions and have them in your legion, and just get away with it. So if you want something like some Terminators, some like Tyrant Siege Guard or full Mataras Terminators from the Ultramarines, you can able to do that as well. So pretty solid all-rounder. Pretty good. Next up, Blood Angels. They're a close combat legion, which is pretty good. I'm going to put these in a good all-rounder, and that kind of hurts me because I'm a bit of a Blood Angel fan. Sanguinius is a really good Primarch. They've got some pretty decent characters. I just feel as though the Games Workshop have kind of dropped the ball in regards to the Blood Angels when it comes to them, purely down to the fact that there's certain units that we've kind of got given in a PDF, like Sanguinary Guard, but just aren't good. And it's kind of like they seem to be sort of destroyer-centric when it's sort of not really what you really want. It's not how you typically imagine a Blood Angels Legion to work. But yeah, the +1 to wound is pretty decent. It's always quite nice to get that, and obviously it only works on the turn that they charge, which is pretty good. And yeah, but I think they're a good all-rounder. I think you can do some pretty decent stuff with them, and you can have a lot of fun with them, and I don't think you're necessarily going to handicap yourself like you will with other legions. So next up, we've got the Dark Angels, and the Dark Angels, unfortunately, I'm going to be putting could be better. Purely down to the fact is that they have rules for rules for rules. Their Legion rules are so confusingly mental that it takes a lot to kind of get your head around what that Legion actually does. They have some beautiful models. Lionel Johnson's amazing. The entire concept of the Legion is really good. The issue that they have is like there's so many layers to it, and it can kind of become a little bit confusing, and that's not really what you want when it comes to a Legion. You kind of just want your Legion rule, your reaction, and then your warlord traits and your Legion items and stuff, but they kind of don't get that. They kind of get like, here's another rule on top of a rule on top of another rule on top of another rule, and it's just a little bit too much, and I think it's a little bit overly too complicated for what it needs to be. So next up, we're going to have the Death Guard. I am going to be putting the Death Guard into a solid legion. I think the Death Guard are very, very good. The ability to actually have heavy squads just count as being stationary even after you've made a normal move is really, really handy. Now, that's really good if you want a lot of big guns, and with the amount of tanks and super heavies and walkers and all of the crazy stuff that you do get in Horus Heresy, the ability to basically be able to still move onto objectives, dominate the ground, and still lay down some serious amount of las cannon fire or other heavier weapons is a really solid choice. They are let down by some of the stuff that they've got, like, you know, and I'm not a big fan of the Grave Wardens, and I do think, you know, maybe that they need to be a little bit more resilient, because obviously they are the Death Guard, but you know, pretty solid all-rounder. Next up, the Emperor's Children. Now, this isn't a hard one for me, because the Emperor's Children are a fun legion. I'm going to put them into a good all-rounder, I think. They kind of do play into a very good strength of close combat, and they do play into a good sort of gunline army, and they can kind of sort of blend between the two. They have some really quite nice units. And they obviously their legion trait and everything else is built around the initiative, which is obviously the key to combat, because you're obviously striking first. You get to kill models first, and if you strike them at a higher initiative, they're not going to be able to return attacks back to you. So they have that sort of good all-rounding ability. So they've got some good gun units, and they've also got some good close combat units as well. They've obviously got a big crazy ass demon Primarch as well, which is always kind of cool to see. But yeah, they're a very solid all-rounder, I think. A very, very good all-rounder. I really quite like them. They are probably one of my favourite. I really just wish that we would hurry up and get plastics, and then I would 100% do a Horus Heresy Emperor's Children army. But the Noise Marines need to be plastic, otherwise it's just not going to happen. Next up, the Sons of Horus. I've played them a lot, and I'm going to put them into a good all-rounder. I'm not going to say that they're amazingly broken or solid or anything like that, but I am going to say that they are they're a good all-rounder legion. They've got some access to some really good units, and they've got a good host of characters. But I do think that I could put them in the broken category if you go for something like Horus Ascended, but I'm not going to, because, you know, not many people are playing 4,000 point games, which is basically the bare minimum of what you need him in. So yeah, I'm going to stick him in as a good all-rounder, list. I think Sons of Horus are pretty good. Very, very interesting legion to play. Next up, the Imperial Fist, and I'm putting this down purely because this is what always happens. I'm going to put them in the broken. And the reason why I'm putting them in the broken in the section is basically the absolute mentalness that is Wardens and some of the other stuff, and the Huskals and everything else that they've got. They have an amazing Rites of War which lean heavily into their units and their unit synergies, and there's very few legions like them out of the 18 that really sort of hone into that, and the Imperial Fists are one of them. They are able to have a unit build, a selection of units into a Rite of War and get a crazy amount of bonuses to make them extremely good. So I'm just going to be putting them into the broken section because they are literally busted. A solid legion. The only downside is people don't like playing in yellow, and that's probably the reason why you don't see as many. But with Imperial Fist contrast paint, there is no excuse not to be able to paint them. But yeah, pretty solid. Next up is the Iron Hands, and I'm going to be putting them solid or broken. Oh, I'm going to be putting them in the solid, and they're everything a salamander wishes they were. Literally, they're everything a salamander wishes they were. The ability to just have that +1 strength all the time against everything is just so good. They're pretty resilient. They've got some really good units. You can go for a tank build, you can go for a really nice hard hitting Terminator build. You've got they're really quite good. They're a solid legion, and really kind of interesting as well. Ferrus Manus is an absolute monster in combat. And it's just so good to see. But yeah, Iron Hands, definitely a solid legion. Next up, the Iron Warriors. I'm going to be putting the Iron Warriors into a solid legion. Basically, the reason for that is they have some pretty standard builds, which are quite good. And then they've got some pretty busted builds, which just become stupid. But I don't think many people would be playing that because it is actually one-dimensional and quite sort of boring, and that's the whole sort of having your warlord basically getting your double fire with your legion trait, with your legion reaction, where you get shot at, you get to return fire, and you get to do it twice, and you basically have that unit in something like a big block of Tyrant Siege Guard, and they just eradicate everything that they kind of targets. They are very good. They've got some really cool sort of thematic rites of war where you can sort of like everybody else can get sort of stunned and shaken and pinned from the sort of artillery strikes, but you don't, because you're an Iron Warrior and you just don't really care about artillery. The only downside to it is that, that rite of war is like wanting you to take Bastiladons and Medusas, and they suck. Yet the sort of newer sort of resin sort of gun carriage, which is kind of what the Plague Crawler in 40k is based on. They're really good. Is it the Aquilon or something? They're really quite decent. And that's probably about the only best sort of artillery piece you're probably going to get. And I think if the other two tanks were better, you would probably see that rite of war used a lot more, but you kind of don't. So I'm going to be putting the Iron Warriors into a solid legion, section. Next, Night Lords. Night Lords are the bane of my existence. I'm going to be putting Night Lords in... I'm going to be putting them in the solid section, purely because they really are solid. You have really interesting mechanics where if you're outnumbered, and it kind of works on the bulkiness as well. You kind of get bonuses to that. You force your opponent to fight in the dark, and like if you haven't paid the points for searchlights, it could be really annoying trying to fight them because they can see in the dark, but you can't. And it's just I played against Night Lords a lot. One of my friends plays Night Lords. Has an amazing Night Lord army, and it's always a fun game. Sevatar is an absolute boss. Conrad Curzon is like 20+ inch move across the board on his own is just scary. He is a scary Primarch, and he's a Primarch that doesn't seem to need a unit around him. He just kind of does his thing. But yeah, I played a lot against Night Lords for many years, from first edition right into second, and they are a solid, scary legion to face, especially by a player who knows what's what. Next up, the Word Bearers. I'm going to be sticking them into the good all-rounder. They are a good legion. They have some interesting rules. Corruption is very cool. The Gal Vorbak are amazing. Of course, they have a rite of war that leans heavily into the Gal Vorbak, so you can take Gal Vorbak as troops, throw them in Spartans, and basically have a load of crazy-ass possessed Chaos Space Marines jumping out of Spartan tanks and literally mauling you. Ashen Circle are good. You know, they have got some really, really cool stuff. I think one of the biggest thing that kind of lets them down is Logar's not amazing. He's not the best of the Primarchs. You know, and it's a kind of a shame because he's, he could be a lot better. But yeah, Word Bearers, solid all-rounder. Next up, the Raven Guard. I'm going to be putting the Raven Guard into could be better. I think they have potential of being a really cool Legion on par with something like the Alpha Legion, but their rule and the way it works is so convoluted, and in some cases doesn't work because it's like doesn't work against, it's just mental. If you want a lot of sniper heavy army and a lot of snipers, recon squads and stuff with Nemesis bolter rifles and all that kind of stuff, then they could be quite scary. But I just think that they could be a little bit better for what they are, and I think they could have a lot more going for them. I mean, they have some amazing war gear like Talons, like the Lightning Claws are so good, and Dark Furies are amazing. But I just think that one unit and a decent Primarch isn't going to really carry them when the rest of their sort of rule set and assets just aren't up to par. So I think they're almost there. They were very close to being in the all-rounder, but they just slipped down in with the Dark Angels, I think. Salamanders. Oh, it's going to hurt me doing this, but I'm going to have to. Salamanders, so bad. I've tried to. I played Salamanders. I try to advocate for the Salamanders. The Salamanders are really good in one thing and one thing only, and that's if your opponent likes to roll a lot of plasma and a lot of melter. If they aren't doing that, you've got nothing. Personally, I think that you should be -1 to wound them. Just their +1 to their melters doesn't really sort of like their immunity to melter doesn't really make a difference. Their ability to like have it will not die. You never remember it, and it will not die 6+ or at best 5+. One of the best things that they have going for them is Vulcan. But then when you actually realize that Vulcan is walking around with a Thunderhammer that doesn't have Brutal, whereas Ferrus Manus is walking around with a Thunderhammer that has Brutal. Like, Ferrus Manus is scary, whereas Vulcan isn't as scary. Now, he can smash face and carve his way through most armies, but that's only because it's like, you know, he's striking at initiative 5 with a strength 10 -1 AP hammer, whereas other Primarchs are really not as that scared of him. It takes a little bit to kill him, but the Salamanders are just not great in the grand scheme of things. I would love them to be, and I was a denier when I was saying no. They're good. They're good. Like we play in a melter meta. They're good. We have immunity against. No. You're really relying on like your opponent to bring melters, and there's so many other weapons in the game that we don't have, or the Salamanders just don't have any real defense against. So yeah, unfortunately, they are in the so bad section. Next up, Space Wolves. Yeah, I'm just putting them there straight away. Space Wolves are crazy. They are so good. Space Wolf players will say that they're not, and probably argue that they're a solid Legion. I would say that they're broken. They have one of the best reactions, Legion reactions, in the game, by far. They have some insane units. They have Leman Russ. They have Psykers that are Earth Shamans. They have some amazing units. Their Sworn, their Varang, their Terminator Elite. there's just so many the good things going for this Legion, and so yeah, they are busted. I think I've only ever really beat Space Wolves once, and I think I was really lucky on my returning fire and stuff like that. But yeah, they're just, once they get within 9 inches of you, you're scared to move because they're like, I'm going to react to you, and they just move and then charge you, and you're like, but it's my turn, and that's what they do. They're just nuts, absolutely nuts. And so yeah, that's the Space Wolves. Next up, the Thousand Suns. I feel like I want to put the Thousand Suns here, but I feel that they are actually quite interesting, and I'm going to put them here. Could be better. Now, the reason for that is very simple. I do think that the Thousand Suns are, if played right, and understanding how the psychic powers work and the sort of little nuances that you can get in there, you can build quite a scary army. Their rights of war are pretty decent. They've got some pretty decent some tools to them. They could be better. Magnus is not bad. He's as Primarchs go, he's not one of the worst. And I just think that I think a lot of people are kind of comparing them to First Edition when they were absolutely broken. Like, when the Thousand Suns come into the game with the Inferno book, they broke the game because they were doing some things that just were absolutely nuts. And in a time when, in a game system or a setting in the game where librarians weren't as prevalent and you didn't really have as much psychic defense, when you had an entire psychic legion turning up just absolutely slapping the bake out of people, that's kind of left sort of a bad taste on people's mouths. And I think Thousand Suns players sort of like look back at that and go, well, we're not as good as then, so therefore we're really bad. And everybody else that kind of remembers First Edition kind of is like, yeah, well, they're not as good. I think there's definitely some play to be had with the Thousand Suns. I'm going to be doing a separate video on them very soon. So yeah, stick out for that one. I do think they're pretty decent. I think they could be really better. I think with a little bit of tweaking, they could be really, really solid. So yeah, I'm going to keep them in the could be better section. Next up, the Ultra Smurfs. Yeah, they're good all-rounders. The Ultramarines are a cool legion, and I know that's probably going to trigger some people from me saying that, but they really are a cool legion. They have some interesting rules. They've got some really cool units. Full Mataras Terminators everyone loves and hates in equal measure. Guilliman is a really good Primarch who not only is pretty decent in the role of being a badass on the battlefield, he also is a force multiplier when it comes to the Legion as a whole. He kind of buffs a lot of stuff around him and buffs the Legion and your army as a whole, which is kind of good. You've got some, like I said, some really good characters. You've got some really good sort of good units. And you kind of, you are the sort of like the good all-rounder. Personally, I would have made the Ultramarines the poster children rather than the Imperial Fists, but hey, they're already the poster child in 40k, in 10th edition or in modern 40k. So I get it. They've picked a different Loyalist Legion to be the poster child. That's kind of cool. But yeah, I've got a big soft spot for the Ultra Smurfs. I think they are pretty decent. So yeah. Next up, the World Eaters. See, this is a hard one because I'm a little bit biased when it comes to World Eaters. I'm going to be putting the World Eaters into a solid legion. And this is probably going to surprise people because some people probably would think that they're probably middle-of-the-road, good all-rounder. But I think that with how the game can be played, with the reaction, there things like Spartans, three Spartan meta. You heard it here. Definitely a thing. Do it. If you're playing World Eaters, 3 Spartan meta, Angron, drop pods, fast units that can pretty much hit hard in combat. You can get across that table really, really, really quickly and absolutely shred face. And one of the things that you'll notice in the Horus Heresy games is that close combat units can generally do quite a lot. Like, look at Space Wolves. Space Wolves are primarily a close combat army and do really, really well. If you look at the Imperial Fist units that do incredibly well, they're essentially close combat units. So, you know, the Horus Heresy isn't necessarily a shooty game. There is a lot of element of getting in and fighting. And the World Eaters are probably one of the best legions in the game when it comes to close combat. They are brutally scary. Now, yes, in first edition, we had the Inducti, and they were scary, and they were mental, and they were just, you know, that's all you would see was Inducti running around with that little apothecary. But they don't really need that now. They've got a really good Legion trait. They've got a really good reaction. Angron doesn't give the Legion anything. Angron is just a blender. You just put him on the board and let him go and watch him just smash through the enemy army. Like, that's what Angron does, and you just have things following up. Khan is a scary character. You know, the Rampagers are pretty good. Red Butchers are really good. They have a lot of scary elements, and it's all close combat focused. So they're kind of your classic sort of point and click Legion, and you just go, and that's what's really, really good about them. So yeah, I would say that they're a very, very, very solid Legion. And last up, the White Scars, and I'm going to be putting the White Scars in solid as well. They are really good. The only downside I think they have is I'm not a big fan of the sort of Terminator guys. Is it the Kashyyyk, the whichever one, the Terminator ones. I'm not a big fan of them, and I'm not a big fan of their rule. I really love the jet bike guys, and I think the jet bikes are really, really good. The ability to have a mounted army is really kind of cool, and that's awesome. I think that they just have some really good stuff. If Jakatahai Khan had a jet bike model, I would put them in the broken list, because having a Primarch that has a jet bike with a entirely jet bike army would be super scary. The ability to get from A to B really, really quickly would just be absolutely nuts. So yeah, that's it. So that's the tier list. That's how I've laid them out. So like I said, a lot of this is based on my opinion. You know, so some people would be like, "Oh, what are you talking about?" But it's just how I view the legions and what I view them as, and it's just a bit of fun. You know, you've kind of got to do content like this, and I might do more tier lists in a later date. I might do the best characters or the best Primarchs. That would be kind of a cool one. A Primarch tier list. Ooh, that would be kind of fun one to do. So if you want to see that, you know, let me know in the comments below. But yeah, so I'm going to be doing a lot more Horus Heresy content. I'm going through my book, planning my army, what I'm going to be doing and how I'm going to be doing it. I still haven't fully picked a Legion. I'm kind of on the fence between a couple of them. I can safely say that the Death Guard, as much as I would like to do them because they would be a fun painting project, is probably not going to happen because I just don't think they fit my play style. I like a little bit of close combat and a bit of shooting. I do like a lot of close combat, and I would probably do the World Eaters. But I would see Chainsword. I'd probably would rather do them in 40k because I like the idea of having Demon Angron. So yeah, it's probably between the Word Bearers. And the one thing that's putting me off with the Word Bearers is painting red, because if you've checked out my Instagram, you'll know that I'm currently working on my Blood Angels, and, you know, started working on them, and the Howling Griffins are red as well, and, yeah, so doing another Red Legion, I know I could do them grey, and do them, you know, before Calth, after but they kind of started turning red after Mokari. So yeah, that's probably the reason why I'm not doing them yet. The Night Lords are definitely at the top at the moment because of the ability, one, of painting a dark blue Legion. I really kind of like the idea of that, and I haven't painted a dark blue army for some time, since having a Crimson Fist army a long time ago. So that kind of intrigues me. I can go down the route of a lot of close combat units like Assault Marines. The biggest thing at the moment I'm trying to work out is like Praetor models and parts, like 3D printed potentially helmets, because like there's not many bat wings. But yeah, so I'm sort of like looking, but I'm going to be doing a video probably next week once I've fully decided on what Legion I'm going to be doing. And the Thousand Suns are there amongst that. I'm definitely tempted to do them purely because nobody does them. And I think they would be kind of interesting. And Magnus did nothing wrong. So yeah, there's some really good stuff. One of the outliers that keeps creeping in is the Sons of Horus. But so yeah, there's a lot of cool stuff there in the traitor side. We'll see. There may be an absolute out of the blue curveball just pop up in the video when I do my I've picked a Legion video. So we'll see what that brings. But all in all, I'm going to be doing a lot more content on the Horus Heresy. I'm going to be getting back into that in a big way. I do really miss it. So yeah. So if you want to continue supporting me, please hit that subscribe button, like, share, comment. Let me know what you think of the tier listing below in the comment section, and we can have a chat about it. And yeah, and then we'll have a bit more stuff. And if you want to see more content along this line, let me know as well. And I will catch you all in the next video, everybody. Goodbye for now.